Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited about today's guest because this is truly a lifelong entrepreneur. I always argue that entrepreneurship is in our DNA. Once we've gotten bitten by that bug, we cannot avoid it. And today's entrepreneur is such a shining example of that. He's been an entrepreneur really since he was 8 years old. And I think it helps that his mom is an accountant because even when it came to his allowance, he was forced to budget. He was forced to track all of those things, and it's followed through into his adulthood and into his career and into the business that he's launched into the world to help other people make better decisions when it comes to growing their business. So let me tell you all about today's guest. His name is Justin Merritt. Justin is the co-founder of TwinSix and an industry leader in financial and operational performance management. With over 20 years of experience in finance, business strategy, and technology, Justin has worked with companies of all sizes to streamline decision-making and drive growth through data-driven insights. If you're listening to that and you're thinking, I've never made decisions with data-driven insights, well, Justin's going to demystify so much of that today, and he's going to make it really simple, which is why I'm so excited to chat with him today. His passion for empowering finance and operations teams with innovative tools has been a driving force behind Justin's career and the nexus for starting TwinSix with a mission to simplify complexity for businesses across various industries. I love that simple mission. It's easier said than done though, so we're all going to learn a lot from Justin here today, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Justin Merritt. All right, Justin, lots of good stuff for us to get into today, but first things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Good to be here.
Heck yes, I teased a little bit about your very young entrepreneurial beginnings and obviously all the cool work that you're up to now, but take us beyond the bio. Who's Justin? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, I guess, from early age, just very driven to try new things and experience things. I think the way to sum it up is I love learning. So that's kind of always just driven me to explore. And I think fortunately, from my parents to my grandparents, they always encouraged me to do that, which gave me a lot of space to kind of just try different things and figure out what worked and what didn't. And then, you mentioned it in the bio, but having a CFO for a mom, she was very accounting oriented and making me track my budget and things like that. So even when I was doing like lawn mowing business, I had to keep track of like what I was spending on gas for my dad's lawnmower and do the maintenance on the lawnmower myself. So just kind of instilled that end-to-end understanding of everything that's involved in going and actually doing something.
Yeah, Justin, before we get to the stuff that you currently do, I want to pick on those young beginnings because I think it's so important for us to address that entrepreneurial bug that I teased at the top of today's episode because I'm similar to you. I didn't start quite as young as you and I didn't have that entrepreneurial influence from my parents, but I started my first business when I was 18 years old. And so from that point forward, Justin, it was really hard for me to accept kind of the traditional view of get a job, work for 40 years, retire, live off your 401k. That always struck me as a little bit differently because I started to see opportunity everywhere. Once I started to create opportunity for myself, talk to me about that mindset and if that's been the case for you throughout your career.
Yeah, I think that, kind of learning mindset and just experimentation mindset really helped shape things. And then when you think about different jobs and different roles, it helped me kind of question positively, right? Like, is there a better way to do this? Can we look at or approach this problem differently? And that's something that I've always tried to carry through and carry with me into everything I do. And really that shaped kind of my professional career before starting TwinSix quite a bit. And that led to some pretty accelerated growth, just career-wise and great career opportunities because I worked at some companies who really responded well to that kind of approach. They wanted to do things better, they wanted to improve, and so having somebody to be that kind of improvement advocate, I'll call it, was really helpful for them, and I got rewarded for that, which was really fortunate.
Yeah, and that's why I love, even within the world of corporate, we always hear that term. It's a newer term, but we do hear it on the rise, which is intrapreneurial. entrepreneur, having those internal entrepreneurs, because Justin, you are a change agent. You so correctly pointed out, I think it's so smart and articulate the way that you brought it up, which is you question things. And I think that's at the heart of being an entrepreneur. Let me ask you this though, because starting out as a young entrepreneur, where along the way did you have that thought of, this is what I actually want to do and contribute to the world? Because as you said, you obviously had a career in corporate as well. And with that in mind, it's something that's always sitting there and wondering, well, what form is this going to take? What's my business going to be? When am I going to pull the trigger on it? There's so many questions in that realm. Walk us through those thoughts.
Yeah, I think for me, it was something, over the years, definitely always kind of had side projects and side things going, and really a goal to eventually get to a place where I could kind of fully shift and really start something completely on my own. And the thing for me, and probably because of my business background and engineering background, it was very, making sure that the timing and the market was right, which I know is not always kind of how entrepreneurs approach things. But fortunately, for us at TwinSix, I had a great group of people who kind of all wanted to kind of try something new at the same time as me, people I'd worked with that I knew we worked very successfully together. And that really shaped and created, I think a great runway for us to really try this out and go after it. And that was kind of, the people side of it. Then from a technology side of it, there's a few new entrants to this market of performance management, and a couple that are really making waves, and one in particular. And so, working with them to figure out how could I work with them, but not for them. And so that opportunity was there too, as they were really starting to take off in North America. And so kind of all those pieces lined up and made it, it's still very risky, of course, to do something like this, but essentially a no-brainer to go after it. And the timing was right, the people was right, the technology was right. And so we knew that we could attack it and do it well.
Yeah, really well said. And Justin, anytime I hear people using words that are at the crux of what they do, I always want to know more about how they define it, how they view it. And obviously you've let the cat out of the bag there with performance management. It is that umbrella under which you operate. What the heck is performance management, Justin? Why is the timing right? Why is this the area that you focus on?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. When I started my career early on, and very much, I'm not crazy old, but very much in the days of, we didn't have iPhones and stuff like that, right? And so I think back, like working at Verizon and working in their internal audit and corporate finance team, and we did, for example, audit packs, and those audit packs were to essentially assure that the revenue was accounted for correctly and everything else. All of that was done by paper and manually. And so we looked around and we said, there's got to be a solution, for this. And I came up with the idea of, let's do this through Adobe PDFs. And so we created this kind of electronic audit process that we trialed out and then eventually rolled out and saved, a ton of money and a ton of time from the audit process. And so that was kind of, those types of initiatives, not just at Verizon, but at companies everywhere, were kind of the early forms of this concept of performance management. How do we look at the business? How do we understand what the business goals and objectives are, and kind of look systematically through the different things the business is doing and make it easier for the business to achieve that kind of peak performance. And so that's everything from, forecasting and budgeting to closing the books and account reconciliation to reporting the results, analyzing the results, and really ultimately, how do you empower those decision makers that are in the departments to have better tools so they can understand, how they're doing as a department and understand, what decisions they should be making day to day to, again, help the business achieve their goals, whether that's, revenue growth or profit growth or both, or expense reduction. And so that's kind of the market of performance management is different tools that help businesses and empower businesses to do that. And the great thing is that over the last, probably, I guess, 10, 15 years, there's been incredible advances in technologies, as we all know, and that's really set the stage to actually, rather than Adobe PDFs, you have tools like Blackline for accounting close and reconciliation, right? You have other tools like Pigment, the tool that we work with for doing planning and budgeting, forecasting things. And so there's great tools out in the market that can really help businesses kind of accelerate that journey and improve the overall toolkit or toolbox that their employees have to help the business perform.
Yeah, Justin, I really appreciate, even in that overview that you just gave us, you made a stark difference in contrast between revenue and profit. And clearly that is so ingrained in the way that you think and the way that you approach business. Talk to us about painting that financial picture, because I feel like most entrepreneurs and most business owners don't have that level of strategic intentionality that you have looking at businesses and making decisions on behalf of businesses. What is that overall picture that you look at? Even, differentiating, I'd love those insights about differentiating revenues and profits, but even broader than that.
Yeah, I think, when you think about entrepreneurs or any business, a lot of times there's focus, on top line growth, right? We want to accelerate top line growth or get new customers. And, maybe because I lived through the, the deep recession and manufacturing and things like that. But, there's a lot more important things. And I think when you look at the business, you have to, of course, understand how are you going to grow your top line and understand, where is your revenue going to come from? How can you have diversified revenue streams so that if one thing starts not going as well or a competitor enters, you're protected and can still make revenue. But then of course, your margins and your profit become very important too, along with cash flow. Those kind of things really start to drive your ability to reinvest in the business, to grow the business and continue to provide better services ultimately out to your customers. And a lot of times, like you said, people kind of ignore the profit line in pursuit of the revenue. But what I think, a lot of successful businesses, and certainly myself, over my career, have found that sometimes, it's okay to have lower revenue, right? But if you're getting more of those dollars into your pocket or into the profit line, that's a great thing, right? Through what if you're an accountant or a finance person, you would know as contribution margin. And so that's something, I always talk to businesses about, understanding and making sure they're considering that contribution margin in their decision making.
Yeah, Justin, holy cow, we've got to go deeper into this, because you just revealed one of the lessons that was hardest for me to learn as an entrepreneur. So starting out as a teenager, I'd always heard that phrase. I think we've all heard it by this point. Cash is king. And it's become a cliche. And the beautiful thing about cliches is that, one, they're rooted in some very profound wisdom and important insights. But two, they're also kind of watered down because we've heard it so much. We don't fully appreciate the importance of it. You just talked again about the importance of cash flow, and it comes down to that. And obviously we're talking about big topics today with regards to financial modeling and data-driven decision making and all of that. Why is cash so central? Why is cash so unique when we're talking about revenue and profit and all of these different things? Cash is that one component that we always strip out and focus on.
Yeah, and a big part of that, I think, comes down to the simple fact that as a business, you can't pay your employees, you can't pay your bills, you can't have cool software that helps you out with stuff if you don't have the cash to support that. And so focusing on certainly growing the revenue line, but then how are you converting that revenue into ultimately cash and converting it into a positive cash flow that exceeds your costs? That's going to generate that ability to invest and continue to hire more people. For example, for us as a new business that's starting out, that's a huge focus of ours, right? Is how do we make sure that we have a quick cash conversion cycle? We can have cash in the bank, so that gives us the confidence that we can go out, we can hire ahead of essentially the demand curve for our services. We can get people in, we can get them trained, and without cash and without a focus on cash, it's really hard to make those decisions. And I think that's where a lot of businesses find themselves in a really tight spot. Maybe they overhire, now they're having trouble making payroll, and especially as a newer business, it's really hard in today's credit markets and things to get access to lines of credit or funds, and so it's not as easy as go down to the bank and they'll just happily give you 2%, 1% line of credit. That stuff's really hard to come by these days, especially for new businesses. And so focusing on that cash conversion and generating free cash flow into your business is going to give you that assurance that you can continue to grow, continue to add people, which will then ultimately drive your capacity to generate revenue and ultimately generate that almighty contribution margin that we've been talking about.
Yeah, Justin, hearing you talk about these things, it's fun because not only are you giving us a crash course in all of these financial considerations, but even, I would argue, more importantly, you're giving us insights into how all of this leads into the actions we take as business owners, the decisions that we make, the places that we focus. You talk about cash conversion and cash flow generation. Justin, talk to us directly about how those things factor into the way that we operate, because this is touching our operational and strategic decision making as well. Is it in the way that we structure terms? Is it in the deals? Is it in payment terms? Is it in the way that we charge for our services? How many different components does this touch, and what are examples of some of those decisions?
Yeah, it's really all of those things that you touched on and more. I mean, I think about it, first and foremost, your cash outflow. With employees, you kind of have a fixed schedule, right? You have your payroll schedule, pretty hard to negotiate with employees and say, hey, why don't we pay you once a month instead of semi-monthly or bi-weekly? You kind of have that fixed. And then when you think about your other vendors, right, just thinking about like a lot of the software that you might be looking at for your business, maybe they offer an annual subscription for a discount. And maybe that discount's 15-20%, but they also offer the ability to pay monthly. And so one of the things to really consider strategically is that 20% worth it for that additional cash outflow? Because if you do that annual price, right, you have kind of that big cash outflow to pay for the annual license versus the monthly license is much lower. So that's going to give you more cash month to month to actually invest in things like people or marketing to generate, additional revenue coming in. So the vendor side, it's definitely something to think about and focus on. What are those terms that you're accepting? Is the discount they're offering for, paying in advance for a year, is that worth it? Are you absolutely sure you're going to keep that software for a year, for example? Then, on the other side of that, when you're working with your customers, I think there's a lot of flexibility from customers because they're going through the same challenges that you're having as a business, right? They're really thinking about cash flow. They're thinking about where and how and when they want to invest that cash. And so if you're providing a value-added service or a product to them, that's often a lever that you can have. And so kind of the flip side, right, is how much is it worth to you to accelerate that cash collection? Can you negotiate that maybe somebody pays a higher amount upfront in a contract in exchange for a discount? And maybe that higher amount up front, that cash being in your bank, is going to give you the capacity to go hire a couple more people, which can then generate more revenue, right? And so that kind of, strategic tug of war in terms of, we always don't, we want to not give things away or not discount things, but a lot of times that can be a really effective strategy, especially early on as you're trying to generate that positive cash flow, because you can get your clients to actually accelerate their payments to you, and that's going to be really more helpful to you to have that cash so that you can go make those investments and continue to grow your business.
Yeah, Justin, you and I were joking off the air before we hit record about the improv nature of these conversations and these episodes here on the show. And what I love about that is you are so effortlessly reeling off all these very important strategic decisions because it's second nature to you. But I'm sure that you understand even better than I do that it's not second nature to business owners. They can't see all of these things as objectively as you can, which of course is why TwinSix exists and why you're able to bring these services to so many clients. But my question to you strategically and really business wise is how are you so able to effectively and efficiently walk into a business that's not yours and dissect and analyze all of these things? Because you're talking about so many different factors. We're not just talking revenue side today. It's very clear that you're making very strategic decisions on the expense side as well. How the heck do you walk into a business and dissect all of these things to paint that picture of where we can start making decisions?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple things, right? So over years of experience and working at the large kind of corporations that I worked at for a long time, I got the exposure to a lot of different business models and a lot of different business challenges, managing things through the Great Recession, for example, where we had markets disappear, like literally down 90+% for a few years. So some really tough times, and certainly learned a ton through that, right? Learned how those kind of things things that I knew inherently as, that experience growing up and kind of starting these little micro fun businesses like mowing lawns and making stress balls and stuff, right? Learning how those concepts that I was familiar with, those concepts that were then reinforced in university and an MBA school, how to actually apply them and get results from them. So, when we work with a business, we can, quickly identify some common factors, right? Because for different businesses, obviously things are different. There are things that are unique and things that are very special about every business. But a lot of these core concepts and ideas are core. And sometimes what you need is you need to have some skilled people who are able to kind of take that step back, look at the big picture, look at what are you trying to achieve as a company, what's working well, what's not working well, but then have that ability to then dive down into those micro details to start to dissect things like when we're talking about cash, and is cash a problem? Well, let's talk about some of the different strategies to help make it not a problem, and let's look at those different sides of the equation. And so while every business is special and unique, there's a lot of those kind of common factors and kind of common starting points for the analysis that can kind of kick things off and lead to some low-hanging fruit for quick wins, and then lead to some medium and longer term goals and objectives to help improve that longer term performance of the business.
Yeah, I really love the way that you articulate that. And it's easy for all of us as business owners to convince ourselves, no, my business is totally different. It's totally unique. It's unlike anything else that's out there. But you're right. Those commonalities are true across businesses, because at the end of the day, business is simple. We just complicate it in so many different ways. And so with that in mind, I do want to talk about, in fact, I'll out myself here publicly, Justin, because one thing that I'm so fascinated by about what you guys do at TwinSix is financial modeling, because I think back to my days as an undergraduate business student, and junior year of college, we were tasked with doing some financial modeling for it was a theater company in the Boston area. And Justin, as teenagers, as students with no real world experience, we mostly made things up. We didn't know what we were doing. When you ask a bunch of teenagers to financial model for a real life business, it's so hard to understand what that looks like. And so I feel like, just like when we sit down and write a 10-year business plan, we're really just kind of making things up. We're dreaming a little bit. Of course, we hope to be making educated decisions. So because teenage me got that all wrong, Justin, in the real world, what does financial modeling look like? What is it? What's the benefit of it? Why is it so important for us as business owners to understand and to actually have in place in our businesses?
Yeah, I think, I'll start this maybe with a reflection. There was a recent interview with Howard Schultz, Starbucks, and he talked about the initial business plan that he was out trying to pitch to get investment to open more Starbucks stores. And he had in the plan, he had it as I think it was 1,000 stores that he was going to go open. And this is back in the days of like printed copies and stuff. And then he was looking it over right before some of these pitch meetings, and he's like, yeah, nobody's going to believe that we can open 1,000 stores. And so he took white out and whited it out so that it would be 100 stores, because that seemed like a more believable number. And so you're absolutely right. When we think about kind of some of those long-term, those aspirational plans, 5-10 years, those are kind of in a lot of ways made up, right? They're aspirational. They should be goals that you believe you can achieve and that you can put loose plans around how to achieve. But then when you kind of dial that back to, okay, let's not talk 5 years, let's talk the next 24 months, let's talk the next 12 months, right? Now, okay, let's talk the next 3 months and look at that in smaller chunks. And then now you get into kind of the month to month. And so the financial modeling, right, it takes different forms based on kind of what you're looking at from that timeline perspective. And when businesses are really running highly efficiently, they have those kind of long-term, aspirational goals. They're able to stick to those and hold to those. And then they're able to adjust in that more near term, in that kind of monthly view, or sometimes even weekly view, depending on the type of business you're in, to make sure that you're always realigning toward that long-term objective. And that's something that, you can see over and over again in highly successful businesses that have been around for a long time, is they don't compromise on what those kind of aspirational goals are, but what they're doing is they're really focusing on that day-to-day performance, decision-making, month to month, week to week, to get you to that place where everything is kind of guided toward those goals. And that can be really hard because, we get caught up in the day-to-day day-to-day of the business. Things go right, things go wrong. We get really excited. I'm sure, as you know, Brian, you get really down because like maybe a deal falls through or something, right? And those are okay, right? And what you have to do is be able to take that step back, understand how does this impact, kind of my near term, my current decision-making process, and then how does that tie into those longer-term goals, and what are we going to do to adjust so that we can still get to those longer-term objectives.
Yeah, Justin, the way that you talk about it, I so appreciate the realities that you bring to the table with regards to what businesses go through, because just as much as you've been talking to us today about a well-oiled machine, a business that is running efficiently, you're also acknowledging those hiccups along the way that, yes, for sure, we can all relate to. And I think it's important to not only call those out, but build those into our expectations, and our expectations internally, as well as our expectations when it comes to our financials. It's so important to hear that, which leads me to ask you, what is it that causes businesses to work out and reach out and work with a company like TwinSix? Is it in those good moments where they're saying, hey, we're growing really fast and we want to unlock even more growth? Or is it in those moments of being stuck? What's some of that? What's the catalyst that inspires people to say, you know what, it's time for us to start making more data-driven decisions and insights and start to understand the financial picture of how we can be a well-oiled machine?
Yeah, I think, I really think there's kind of three main points that businesses hit. One is if they're struggling, honestly, and they're saying, this is really a challenge and we're really having trouble getting to those long-term objectives, or, something has dynamically changed in our market, and we're struggling to kind of adjust the course, right, of the business. A lot of times kind of that can be a catalyst to start to look at, hey, we want somebody else to kind of help us take a look at this. Maybe there's for example, some technology that can help us model these things out better, model it quicker so we can be more nimble as an organization. The second would be, like you mentioned, things are going really well. And sometimes, fortunately, it still happens today, even in the crazy markets and stuff we have going on, but things go really well for businesses, and businesses grow, unexpectedly fast, going from pre-revenue to revenue to like, wow, we might be IPOing in a couple of years, that kind of insane growth. And a lot of times that can be a good catalyst too, because they're now having to think about, we don't have the process in place. We don't have the systems. We don't have a great way to tie our day-to-day operational, decisions and things that we're doing into those longer term objectives. How do we get better at that? Because we want to sustain this growth. We want to not lose what we've kind of all of a sudden been so successful at doing. And then more recently, actually a big catalyst has been around people. As I think anybody who has employees knows, the market has become extremely difficult to hire and retain talented people, and just generally, right, the labor pool is shrinking, and especially for some of those core skills like finance and accounting and analytics, there's actually less and less people going through school for those types of degrees and those kind of educational paths. And so what that means is that organizations often now are looking and saying, hey, we just need some help with this stuff because, we can't find the right people. So let's reach out. Maybe there's an external organization. Maybe we can look at some software that can help supplement that people gap so that with a smaller team in place in some of those core functions, we can still do more and still continue on that growth path without experiencing hiccups or challenge.
Yeah, Justin, hearing you talk about these things, I think what's really evident is not only do you love the financial and operational side of the world, but you genuinely also love business. And so with that in mind, I mean, you're bringing up some really important business considerations: pre-revenue phase, the revenue phase, the scaling phase. There's so many different phases of our business cycle and so many different questions that we face along the way. I'll confess to you publicly that as a marketer, I fall into the trap of saying, more revenue often solves a lot of business problems. But today you've gone in a far more intricate and articulate way there of expressing, well, here's the considerations along the way. Yeah, revenue is one thing, but revenue trickles down into so many other complexities and considerations. With that in mind, what are those inflection points that you've seen for businesses? Thinking all the way through to the pre-revenue companies, to the companies that you've seen scale incredibly well. What are the different questions or focus areas that we should be thinking about throughout those different stages and inflection points?
Yeah, I think, like pre-revenue, recently working with a company who's pre-revenue, they have a concept on a product that's really cool. And it's been really interesting because it took off way faster than they thought, the concept. And so all of a sudden they're selling, their product, and they don't have a great plan for how are we actually going to deliver this product and deliver the service around setting this product up in their customers. And so, that is an inflection point that I see very commonly in businesses, whether they're established or new businesses. They have a new product or a new service, and when it's a great idea, people want it, which is a good thing. But a lot of times, right, that demand can kind of outpace your ability to actually deliver, and so that can be a really big inflection point and challenge of how do you manage through that and not disappoint those potential buyers or those customers, and how do you make sure you're providing a great experience, but kind of almost taper back some of that revenue. Another common inflection point, especially in kind of the technology software type of industry, is as companies get older, as kind of your software ages, you have decisions about investment. Should you be investing heavily in the product? Should you be looking at creating a new product with new technology? And those things can be really challenging decisions for organizations, especially if you're a well-established product and brand, but you're starting to see some flatline in your growth. You're starting to see customers choose newer competitive products. That can be early signaling that you've got some big decisions coming up. Should you be looking at building, a new product to try to address that and fight off some of those competitive concerns? Are there investments you can make in that core product? And then, another inflection point that happens a lot is kind of the kind of third side of that spectrum, which is, you're losing customers, right? The business is not performing anymore. Things are not going well. And so what are you going to do about it? And a lot of times what I've seen, unfortunately, is a lot of businesses, they just kind of keep trying to do that same play over and over again. And then those are the companies you end up seeing kind of get, I always say, like, auctioned off to PE for pennies on a dollar. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of those companies are still very viable. They have, great employees. They have really smart people, but sometimes you have to really rethink and be willing to kind of completely change the approach in what you're doing if things have changed around you in the market. The classic example of this, of course, would be like Kodak with the digital camera revolution, and they were like, no, we're not going to do it. And where's Kodak now? And that happens, whether you're a giant company like Kodak or a smaller entrepreneurial company. It can happen to anybody.
Yeah, gosh, Justin, so many real world insights. I feel like not only are you sharing knowledge and insights with us today, but we've all got a lot of homework because these are giant questions that you're inviting us to ask within our own businesses, and so many important decisions that we have to make with regards to where we're going to go on our growth journeys. And the fact that you're bringing that unfortunate reality to us of sometimes things don't go our way, but that calm understanding of let's let the data drive us. Let's make that smart decision so that we can be sustainable, not just today, but long into the future. So I so appreciate those. Justin, you've handled every single question I've tossed your way completely effortlessly. So let's see if this last one can throw you off, because it is super broad and you can take it in any direction you want. And that is, what's your one best piece of advice? Knowing that we're being listened to by entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own business growth journeys, you are also one of us. You are also a fellow entrepreneur growing your own business along the way as well. So what's that one thing that you want to impart on listeners today?
Man, all right. So the thing I guess that I would say is this is something that I personally struggle with and always have. I love challenge. I love excitement of bringing on new customers, working with new clients, working with new people. And I think one of the things that I've really had to learn very quickly since we started TwinSix is that it's okay to slow down. And sometimes that creates a much better result. And, you talked a little bit ago, Brian, about kind of the flow through, right? Of like generating revenue is one piece of the puzzle. And then that has a trickle down effect to other areas of the business. And so, that's something like for TwinSix, right? We are primarily providing services and value added services. So we have to have the capacity to deliver on those services. We have to have the people who can go and work work with clients and help them improve. And if we don't, then it doesn't really do us any good to bring in additional revenue. And so that's something that for me, I had to kind of learn and get okay with really quickly, because of the people challenge. And, while we are actively hiring and we've hired some great people and we've got great people in the pipeline for hiring, it's one of those things where when you find yourself in that position where you're struggling to, maybe not struggling yet, but where, your ability to kind of get customers exceeds your ability to actually go deliver on what you're going to provide to those customers, it's okay to slow down, right? You've identified a great market. Clearly things are working well, but the last thing that you want to do is disappoint those customers, right? You want to create a great experience and build that body of customers that are going to be brand advocates and love what you provide. And in order to do that, you might have to slow that pace of revenue growth to focus on, growing the people in the organization, which is where, we get back to talking about cash flow and things like that. But that's the thing, I guess, that I would say for people to take away.
Boom. Justin, maybe not the advice that we impatient entrepreneurs want, but certainly the advice that we need. I'm so appreciative. This is exactly why this show exists, because this is the real stuff. This is the stuff that, Justin, you've transparently shared. It took you a while to learn that lesson, and we're all constantly learning that lesson. And the fact that we share that with other entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs around the world, hopefully it accelerates their growth journey as well, because it is important to sometimes slow down, step back, reassess, and make sure that we're doing the things that we want to and over delivering in all of the ways that we want to serve the customers and clients that we aim to serve with our businesses. So I expected it, but you have absolutely delivered. You've been a wealth of knowledge, Justin. I know that people are going to be eager to go deeper into the wonderful world of all the great work and meaningful, important work that you do for other businesses with TwinSix. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, so you can go to TwinSix.io, or you can find us on LinkedIn as well, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We are making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes. No matter where it is you're tuning into today's episode, you can find Justin's website quite simply at TwinSix. That's the number 6 spelled out. So it's TwinSix.io, or you can click right on through from the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning in. So Justin, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Amazing. Thanks for having me, Brian.